discussed what is the Hebrew Bible. We've discussed how Jews and Christians read the Hebrew Bible. We've discussed what is Judaism and what is Christianity. We've discussed how Judaism and Christianity became separate things in the course of the 1st and 2nd century, focusing on that, the formative period, 1st and 2nd centuries. All that by way of introduction. We will now, from this point through the end of the course, we'll be marching our way through a series of rituals that seem to be commanded by the Hebrew Scriptures, which are, these commandments are interpreted one way by the Jews and interpreted some other completely different way by Christians. And isn't it fun to see? And that's what we're going to be seeing. First, a set of rituals, and then we'll be looking at a set of theological tenets. Remember? Tenet, T-E-N-E-T, right? Of theological tenets, which again are ostensibly derived from Scripture, both on the Jewish side and the Christian side. That's what we'll be doing for, well, henceforth, through the end of the term. So today we're starting with rituals first. And of all the rituals to start with, of course, circumcision takes pride of place. So that's what we're talking about today and Wednesday. Okay, is it clear where we are and where we're going? Good, so let's get right to work. So, circumcision, right? So circumcision means, comes from Latin, to cut around. Cutting around because a cut is made around the shaft of the male organ to remove the piece of skin called the foreskin. There we go. I need to make it clear right away up front that many middle-class American males are circumcised. The percentage is lower than it was just a generation ago. It was once over 80%. Now it's somewhere down around 40% of middle-class American males are circumcised, and as part of routine neonatal circumcision. I can ask for a show of hands here about who's circumcised, but I won't do that. The point simply is that you don't have to be Jewish in order to be circumcised. And the key point here, the next follow-up point is, even if you're circumcised, it doesn't mean that you're Jewish. Right, so if you've been Jewish, if you've been circumcised because of this routine neonatal circumcision in America, it just means that you are whatever you are, but you happen to be circumcised. It doesn't make you Jewish more or less. So the kind of circumcision we're talking about here, then, is not the circumcision that your obstetrician will do on your baby. If they ask you want your baby circumcised, you say sure. Right, now I'm not talking about that. We're talking here about a ritual, right? A ritual act with ritual intention and ritual consequences. Okay, so gentlemen, relax. Well, circumcision always makes gentlemen nervous, but okay. So, circumcision is, then we're talking about the circumcision commanded by the Torah. The circumcision that then becomes a or the key ritual marker of Jews and Jewishness. That's what we're talking about today. So, let's get right to the heart of the matter. Circumcision is unique among all the commandments of the Torah. Okay, I ask you to look at the main chapter in the Torah about circumcision, Genesis chapter 17, right, in which God commands Abram to circumcise himself, age 99, circumcise himself, and to circumcise all sons that will be born to him henceforth, and circumcise all the males of his household, meaning slaves or servants. The chapter is arranged in a rather dramatic way, contrasting God's instructions to Abraham and God's instructions to Sarah. And there the gender aspect comes up again. That's what I speak about in my book. But I try in my book to give a general sense of what's going on in the chapter. So now I'm not going to repeat what's in the book too much, I hope. I just want to focus on the big picture and the big important elements. So, circumcision is unique among all the commandments of the Torah. It is the only ritual commandment given to one of the patriarchs in the book of Genesis. Well, there's a prohibition that's also given, but we'll talk about it. Let's explain this point. According to the narrative sequence in the Torah, so Genesis 1 through 11, God is universal God, creates the whole world and all that is therein. Chapter 12 of Genesis. God all of a sudden seems to devote time and attention to one specific man, Abram, later to be renamed Abraham in Genesis 17, in Abraham, and his clan, his wives, his offspring, his comings and goings. And that remains for as long as Abram is alive, Genesis 12 on down. Abram dies, is replaced, as it were, in God's beam headlight by his son Isaac, who in turn is replaced by his son Jacob. Then we have a complicated mess there. We got 12 sons, and we seem to have two heroes emerging in the story, one Judah, one Joseph. Okay, we'll skip that scene. Then the Israelites, children of Israel, another name for Jacob, wind up going down to Egypt. They are enslaved in Egypt. Now in the book of Exodus. Right? They are enslaved in Egypt. Right? God, through a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, right, redeems the Israelites from Egypt and takes them out of Egypt. Brings them to Mount Sinai, or Mount Horeb, if you read the book of Deuteronomy. Right? It reads about Mount Sinai. And there we have the great Epiphany. The great revelation where Moses receives the Ten Commandments, and in the later Jewish imagination, the entire Torah at that moment. So, according to the narrative itself, the commandments begin with the Ten Commandments. Exodus chapter 20. There's a slight warm-up for that in Exodus chapter 12, where the Israelites are given instructions about the Passover, which we'll be reading in a couple weeks down the road. But other than that, in the book of Genesis, you don't have commandments. You have stories. You don't have God giving commandments to the Israelites or to Abram. You have generic commandments. Walk before me and be righteous.
Be fruitful and multiply.
Be fruitful and multiply. Well, maybe. That's not given to the patriarchs. That's a reward for their righteousness. That as a reward for their piety and righteousness, your seed will be as multiple as the stars in the sky. But specific commandments such as don't do any manner of work on the seventh day, you don't find that in the book of Genesis. Specific commandments such as thou shalt not steal, you don't find anywhere in the book of Genesis. Specific commandments not to eat pork, you don't find anywhere in the book of Genesis. Got the idea? Except Genesis 17. Where here we have not just a casually mentioned commandment, but a commandment that is repeated and repeated and repeated and emphasized and emphasized and emphasized. So this commandment, commandment of circumcision, is, the fancy schmancy word is pre-Sinaitic. Pre-Sinai. From before Mount Sinai. Before the Ten Commandments were revealed at Mount Sinai. That's what makes this very, as we say in vulgar English, very unique. You understand why that's vulgar, yes? Because if it's unique, it can't be very unique, it's unique. Right, but vulgar English people think unique is simply wow. So, I did need chalk, but that moment passed. Okay, you'll write pre-Sinaitic on the board. Okay, very good. So, what does that mean, Professor? So it comes to the book of Genesis, so big deal. Well, if you are a Jewish thinker type or a Christian reader of the scriptures, you will notice this anomaly. That here circumcision is the first commandment given in the Torah. Footnote. The rabbis pretend there's another commandment earlier than that, but I'm not going to worry about it there. Back to where I am. Right, there's the first commandment given in the Torah. Not counting the commandment to Adam, don't eat of the forbidden fruit. I mean, that's not a commandment. That's, commandment for an ongoing relationship between people and God. Here we have the circumcision in Genesis 17. This is interesting. Next. Circumcision is, footnote, there is of course one prohibition given to the, this is a thou shalt circumcise. There is one thou shalt not in the book of Genesis. Right? That's the eating the Gid HaNasheh, or what's it called in English again? The
Sciatic nerve.
What?
Sciatic nerve.
Sciatic nerve. Okay, don't eat the sciatic nerve. Alright, that's of an animal. Don't ask. Okay, next.
It means no filet mignon.
Yeah, it means that Jews don't eat filet mignon, right? Because they can't get that part of the animal, that meat. Alright. Jewish kosher butchers, it's too expensive. They can't process it. Okay, back to where I am. I was talking about circumcision, not about food. You see, it always comes back to food, right? The Jews, it always comes back to food. Okay, next. So, the commandment is given to Abraham, in the book of Genesis. Highly unusual. Makes this a commandment, a different category as far as its authority in terms of the Torah's own rhetoric. Next. Performed once in a lifetime. Once you've done it, you've done it. Or once it's been done to you, it's been done. Period. Nothing more to do. Unlike every other commandment, of course, which applies perhaps at every moment of every day. Fear the Lord, honor your father and mother, which apply at every moment of every day, or which are very specific. Every seventh day, don't do any manner of work. On the 15th day of the first month, celebrate the Passover. This is done once forever. It's performed on the body. Right, many commandments, of course, are performed by the body. You do something. Or you don't do something. You refrain from doing something. But this commandment is done on the body. Now, there are some commandments in the Torah that also regulate what is done to the body. For example, no tattoos. Or there are commandments about don't cut your hair in a certain way. So there are a few commandments about what we don't do to the body. But with this commandment, we have an interesting one, which is a commandment to do something to the body. If you want to be pugnacious and polemical, you might say you're mutilating the body. If you don't want to be polemical, you say you're changing the body. You want to be apologetic, you say you're improving the body. But this is the only such commandment. And in fact, it's a little odd, many people think, why there's a prohibition to tattoo, but there's an obligation to circumcise. Interesting. So, on the body. Last, on my special, make this commandment unique among all the commandments. It's called Brit. Right? Or in the Ashkenazi Hebrew pronunciation, bris. But usually we say now Brit. Same word. B-R-I-S, B-R-I-T, B-E-R-I-T. So it's the same word. Right? Brit or bris. It is the covenantal commandment par excellence. Right? This commandment is the covenant. Now, what is a covenant, you ask? We'll come back to this in a couple of weeks. A covenant is that contractual relationship, mutually binding set of conditions that link Israel to God. Israel and God, we got a deal. We have a contract. We have an understanding. And the word for that is covenant. Or as we'll discuss in a couple of weeks, it's not natural, it's constructed. This is an extraordinary idea that the ancient Israelites have in the Torah. Right? God and Israelites come to terms. Those terms are the covenant. That word we used is brit, or covenant. Sometimes translated in the Christian translations as testament. There's an old one, then there's a new one. Jewishly speaking, there's only one, period. So that's the covenant. Now, among the uses of this word, brit, interestingly enough, this commandment, almost alone of all the commandments, can be referred to as the covenant. Meaning, circumcision. Now, there's only one other commandment in the Torah that we see the similar kind of usage. I deliberately was vague in my handout. For a quick quiz here for you day school kids, Sunday school kids, Bible school kids. Right? So, for 10 points. And an opportunity to go on to the bonus round. What is that other commandment in the Torah, which also, at least one biblical passage in the book of Exodus, is called the commandment, the covenant? Harry. Sabbath. You get 10 points. Your parents got their money's worth out of my Maimonides. Right. Right. So there's one passage in the book of Exodus where the Sabbath is also referred to as the covenant, or the sign of the covenant. Interesting language. But what's amazing about Genesis 17 is that the word covenant appears 13 times, as we'll see in one moment. Appears 13 times in the chapter of 17. So, what do I deduce from all this, class? The fact that circumcision alone is given in the book of Genesis before once in a lifetime, done on the body, and is called covenant. I would deduce from that that circumcision, in terms of the Torah's own hierarchy, is pretty damn important. Right? Whoever wrote Genesis 17 clearly thinks that circumcision is a big deal. It's not just another commandment. It seems to be something sui generis. It's a category of its own, with a significance of its own, and a potency, I'm tempted to say, right, that is greater than that of your run-of-the-mill commandment. Like, thou shalt not steal, honor your father and mother. This is different. Now, what does it mean? That's the question we'll turn to next. Okay, questions? Yes, ma'am.
I thought God had established a covenant before, like with Noah after the flood, which was like Genesis 9.
Excellent. Right. So, right, you have in, excuse me, you have in the Torah a series of covenants. Right. You could argue you have a covenant between God and Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, right? I'm giving you a Garden of Eden, but it comes with conditions. Don't do X. Surprise, they do X, right? Right, and then they get kicked out. Then we have another covenant between God and humanity. Humanity sins and God brings the flood. Then we have Noah. In the case of Noah, Genesis 9, we have the language of covenant is used specifically, right? It's explicitly. Before that, it's implicit. Here we have the language of covenant used explicitly, right? And after the flood, the rainbow is the sign of the covenant. The same language as Genesis 17. It is the sign of the covenant. Then you have the covenant between God and Abraham, and then God and the Israelites, and so on. So you have a string of covenants. What that means exactly, I'm not sure. But this is the only one that is ritualized, right? Where this covenant, the relationship between God and Abraham, you're my guy, and Abraham says to God, you're my God. You know, we got a deal here, right? The two of us. And God says, I'm going to seal the deal. Circumcision is the seal. That's the word later Jews used to refer to circumcision, right? We're going to seal the deal with circumcision. Well, that's where I would say at that point, this is something qualitatively different. Good. Questions, observations, complaints? Any gentlemen feeling queasy, or okay here? Good. Then we'll keep going. Okay, so it clearly is the eyes of the narrator in Genesis 17. Circumcision is qualitatively different from your run-of-the-mill commandment. Now, what does it really mean, or what's the narrator trying to tell us, or what's up the narrator's sleeve? Well, at that point, we need to start to investigate and sort of look around. So, Genesis 17. Here's where I do repeat slightly some of the stuff that was in the reading. But it's very clear in Genesis 17 that there is an association between circumcision and progeny, circumcision and fecundity, circumcision and land. So we seem to have a triangle. Namely, Abraham is 99 years old. This poor man does not have an official heir yet. He has a son by a handmaid, Hagar, right? That son is Ishmael, right? Perfectly nice fellow, right? But, the son of the handmaid, right? It's not a son from a wife. The wife is Sarah, or Sarai, now called Sarah. Now, if you ask what's exactly the difference between a wife and a handmaiden, well, that's an interesting question, which I don't really know how to answer fully. But clearly this text assumes there is a difference in status. So from the wife, he has no offspring. From the handmaiden, the concubine, if you will, he has Ishmael. He's 99 years old, let's face it, he's getting a little desperate. So God says, be circumcised. God says, be circumcised, and I promise you a mighty progeny. Well, guess what? Guess what happens in the next chapter? Isaac is born. See? It worked. Now that we have an official heir, Isaac, son of the promise, or son of the covenant, he's called in later Jewish readings of Scripture, right? Just now we have an official heir. Part of being an official heir is you got to inherit something. So he's inheriting not just status of being the man, the God man, right? The man who is standing in close relationship with God. He's also inheriting the land. That's what I meant by we have circumcision, progeny, land, right? These three come together in Genesis 17. So in the eyes of what we assume are let's say the narrator, we assume is a priestly narrator. According to modern Bible scholars, Genesis 17 is a product of the priestly school. So according to the priestly narrators of Genesis 17, right, circumcision is part and parcel of the covenant, namely special status in God's eyes of us, the people, or at least the men, at least. What about the women, you ask? Well, I wrote a book on that. Okay, so but at least for the men, with special status in God's eyes, marking us off as God's people, marking us off as special status in the covenant, marking us off as the tenants of God's holy land. Holy people, holy land, marked by circumcision. That's what's going on in Genesis 17. Now, as many anthropologists, historians, etc. have observed, the association of circumcision with fertility, fecundity, is common. Many cultures that practice circumcision see it either as symbolically, metaphorically, or perhaps physically, seen as an enhancement to fertility. Right? Physically, perhaps, because it is thought to improve ejaculation, or perhaps because metaphorically it somehow removes barriers and somehow opens up fecundity, opens up fertility. This is quite common. The Israelites, or at least specifically the Israelite narrator of Genesis 17, did something unique, which is to take what was a sign of fertility, consequently often performed on the adolescent male, often performed as part of a fertility coming-of-age ritual, or some such where the young male has to go off and, kill an elephant, bag a tiger, and get circumcised, and then he can come back and is ready to take a wife, right, having proved himself worthy. That sort of thing. So the Israelite narrator, right, has done two remarkable things with this ritual. One, associating it with the covenant and God. This is now the mark of covenantal status of circumcision. No one else did that as far as we know in antiquity. The other remarkable thing that this narrator did was he kept its trappings, associations with fertility and fecundity, except now the ritual is not done on an adolescent male, the ritual is done on an infant male. Which is really odd for a fertility ritual. 8-day-old boys are not particularly fertile yet. Right? They still need their mother. So there's something odd going on here, which we modern anthropologist types have not gotten to the bottom of. We don't know exactly where he got this covenant idea from to associate with circumcision, but he did, for which there is no parallel anywhere in antiquity. And moving a fertility ritual to that of an infant boy means, in effect, that the ritual was marking the fertility, not the future fertility of the boy, but marking the present fertility of the father. So it seems to be a ritual that binds father and son. Or as the way several anthropologists have read it, it's a way of taking the boy out of the world of women and into the world of men. Here is an infant recently produced by a woman, the mother, right, without whom this infant would not be, and without whom this infant would die, since after all, in ancient cultures, the mother nurses the baby, or some woman nurses the baby, but the mother nurses the baby, right? But it's our way of, society's way of saying, the woman belongs to the mother, yes, but socially speaking, this is a man in the future. This is a future male who will inhabit the world of men, not the world of women. Or to put it more pugnaciously, paternity trumps maternity. Witness the fact that Ishmael, son of Hagar, very lovely young man, very nice young man. We wish him only the best. But goodbye. Isaac, of course, is the son of the promise. Because Isaac has the right mother and Ishmael has the wrong mother. So maternity does matter. The circumcision is now at tension with this, in which we think paternity is reasserting itself via circumcision. Okay, those are some deep waters. You take Anthro 101, where if you do studies of ritual, I guarantee you you'll do two rituals. One is sacrifice, because everybody does that in Anthro 101. And the second ritual you're likely to study in Anthro 101 is circumcision, which is probably the world's most widely practiced ritual. And you will discuss this. And the meanings associated with circumcision are this long. What's remarkable, Genesis 17 echoes many of these universal themes, but does so in a peculiarly Israelite way. Associated with God, moving into infancy ritual, paternity. This is an interesting package. Okay, questions? No? Okay. I guess it means you all agree with me. Oh, you're all asleep. It is warm in here. Circumcision is a sign of the covenant. Okay, just pay attention to that phrase. We'll come back to that on Wednesday. That's in Genesis 17, verse 11, right? Where in some peculiar way, as I discussed in my reading, the circumcision is not just the covenant, it's also the phrase used there is ot brit. It's a sign of the covenant. What exactly that means, alas, the narrator of Genesis 17 does not explain. So I don't know exactly what it means, sign of the covenant. But later Jews and Christians alike will make much of this phrase. Right? It is the sign of the covenant. So in context, this means it's a sign of the covenant which marks out Jews as special Jews, the Israelites as special in God's eyes. That God, looking upon the circumcision, God knows who's on his team. Just as in the case of Noah, when God sees the rainbow, the sign of the covenant, God is reminded of his pledge never to destroy the world again by flood. Look at the passage. See if you agree with me. That's the simple, plain meaning of the passage. But later Jews and Christians thought it meant something else, as we'll discuss on Wednesday. Other implicit meanings. The trial mark. So I gave you on the syllabus a couple other passages I suggested you may want to read. Depends upon how much you're interested in this. So Genesis 17 you got to read. You got to read it carefully and look at the notes in the JSB and etc. Chew on it. Then a whole bunch of other interesting passages. Which may reflect different conceptions of circumcision within the Torah itself. Genesis 34 is by far and away, I would say, for me at least, the most shocking, the most troubling, the most disturbing chapter anywhere in the narratives of Genesis, and perhaps in the whole Torah. So with an advance like that, you got to go home and read Genesis 34. It's got everything. It's got sex. It's got violence, and not a happy ending either. Not a nice chapter. But anyway, circumcision plays an important role in the plot of Genesis 34, where it seems the narrator does not know anything at all about all those covenantal things, and paternity, and fecundity, and land, and covenant, and all those things you knew about in Genesis 17. The time of Genesis 34, this narrator, same guy, probably not, different narrator, some narrator, doesn't know any of that. This seems to be something that we Israelites do because we've always done it. This is a kind of a national, ethnic, tribal marker. Because we easily have, cut off our earlobes. But this is what we do. You want to join us? You do it. Okay, that's Genesis 34. Look at it if you dare. Leviticus 12, PNC purification thing. Exodus 4. This now is, again, perhaps the most mysterious verses in the Torah, would be this one, in Exodus chapter 4. So Moses has fled Egypt for reasons I won't go into now in the plot. Right? He's off in Midian, where the chief priest of Midian spies a healthy Adonis type. Charlton Heston type, take off his shirt, all the girls swoon, right? So he gives him one of his daughters to marry. So there he is in Midian, right? And he gets the message from God, the time has come to go back to Egypt to redeem your brethren, the Israelites. So, okay, I've summarized for you loosely what's going on in the narrative plot, and there it is, chapter 4, verse 24. And a night encampment on the way, the Lord encountered him and sought to kill him. If you say, Professor, I don't know the context here. Surely there's some explanation here what's going on. No, this is exactly what happened. There is no context. Moses gets on his donkey and is heading back to Egypt, right, as God told him in the previous verse. Right, the next verse is exactly this one. At a night encampment on the way, the Lord encountered him and sought to kill him. What? Lord wants to kill Moses? What? Verse 25. So Tzipporah, that's the name of his Midianite wife, took a flint and cut off her son's foreskin and touched his legs with it, saying, "You are truly a bride of blood to me." To which my response is, what? This is more mysterious. It gets more mysterious, right? The pronoun's not clear. Who's the him? Who's the his? Whose foreskin? Whose legs? And does legs mean legs? Or legs mean something else? What is going on here? And then after it says that when he left him alone, when the Lord left him alone, she added the bridegroom of blood because of circumcision. Right. So I can say without fear of contradiction, nobody knows at all what the meaning of these two verses is. This I can say because the number of interpretations is this long, from which I can deduce that no one is sure. So the ancients, medievals, and the moderns have all grappled with this very mysterious verse. So I can simply say the one key point, and we'll come back to this in a couple of weeks, is that circumcision is here apotropaic. You see that fancy schmancy word? It's apotropaic, meaning it wards off, turns aside. Apo means away or from. Trop, of course, meaning turn. Right? Trop in Latin, the same as Latin vert. So to turn. So it's apotropaic, averting, turning aside evil, destruction, death. Somebody was about to get it from the Lord, and somehow the act of circumcision saved him. Who's the him? I'm not quite sure. But the him is saved because of the act of circumcision done by Tzipporah. Tempted to say a nick in time. Right? Saved the person in danger. Hence it's an apotropaic ritual. This will be important. We'll come back. We talk about the Passover and the Paschal blood. Also notice too the word blood appears in this little passage. Bridegroom of blood you are to me. The only time we talk about circumcision blood is here. Okay, I got a book which I never finished on this subject, so I'm just going to move along. Okay, so here are a bunch of other meetings, trying to sort this out historically, chronologically, etc., needless to say, it's a problem. But the text itself is rich enough to show us that alongside the official meanings in Genesis 17, fecundity, land, inheritance, covenant, status, right, we seem to have a plethora of other meanings that are floating around in ancient Israel, from which or out of which the narrator of Genesis 17 made a selection. But the other ones are still there. They didn't go away. Next point questions on this? Easy one. The answer is no. Okay, the idea that circumcision is a hygienic ritual to prevent phimosis or, infection of the foreskin or other such things, right? These are modern readings which actually go back to antiquity. But they're particularly common among certain kinds of Jews for whom a hygienic ritual is rational and therefore defensible, whereas the mumbo-jumbo gobbledygook about God and covenant and Torah and status is not rational. So if you want to defend the ritual on rational terms, you would argue it has health benefits. And indeed, the ritual is still defended on health grounds by some, for whom it seems to afford some protection against transmission of the AIDS virus from the male to the female, or the infection of the male from the female, the AIDS virus. Whether that is statistically significant benefit, whether that benefit is sufficiently high statistically so as to justify routine neonatal circumcision, that's a question for public health policy, right, and for insurance companies, right? But that's a different kind of question than what we're discussing here. Okay, the hygienic idea is not found anywhere in the Torah. Similarly, when we get to the food laws, right, the idea that Jews are told to avoid pork because Moses is trying to save them from trichinosis, right, is also not likely. That's a secondary reading of what's going on. It's not in the text at all. Okay, but we'll come back to that. So the short answer is no. Other questions? Good. The next important point you need to remember is this metaphor, circumcision. That circumcision means cutting off the foreskin. So already the Bible itself, already the Torah itself, already knows that just as there is a foreskin in the flesh, and circumcision means cutting off the foreskin, taking a knife and cutting off the foreskin. Similarly, there is a metaphorical foreskin, which also can be or needs to be cut away. So here, this is unusual. There aren't too many other commandments where I can see the language can be shown to be used either literally over here and also metaphorically. But here we have it. So circumcision gives us a metaphorical language also. Also. Right? You find that in the book of Deuteronomy, as I give you on your handout. It's also in the book of Jeremiah. And on your syllabus, you have a couple of passages to look at. This is important. This again will be a key to the way Christians will be reading these passages. So you need to understand that Torah itself already is aware of this metaphorical language. If you have a metaphorical foreskin, then you can have a metaphorical circumcision. What does foreskin mean in this case? It means some blockage, something that blocks communication between God and the person and the human being. It's blockage. You're cutting away something that interferes. You're cutting away something that blocks communication. In other words, piety, repentance, listening to the Lord's words, and so on and so on. That presumably means circumcise the heart, means to make the heart ready to receive the divine message. But this is not just some later rereading of these passages. This metaphor is already in the Torah and in the Bible. Remember that for Wednesday. Okay. I'd like to spend the last 8 minutes or so looking at this rabbinic text from chapter Nedarim, which Cohen refers to in the reading. Again, I don't have a Jewish analog to Justin Martyr, so Justin Martyr, I have all this nice Christian polemic laid out clearly before me. So on the Jewish side, I got to look around for Christian Jewish polemics. What does the word polemic mean? Quick, you're all Googling it, I know right away, as I'm saying. I used the word, 500 times today? Right, so what does the word polemic mean? Well, shame on all of you, and I'm tempted to say I'm not going to tell you. All right, I'll tell you.
Argumentative, right?
Argumentative, right. So polemos, right. So polemos in Greek means battle or war. So a polemic is an attack. Something which is polemical is pugnacious, is argumentative. It's out to score points, out to knock out the opponent. That's a polemic. So I could describe circumcision neutrally, or I could describe it polemically, indicating to you that I think it's a body mutilation and it's horrible and it's yucky and I can't believe the Jews ever did it. I don't know why they still do it. That would be a polemic. Right? The opposite of which would be apologetic, which would be to ward off a polemic. Okay? Back to where I am. David, you look unhappy with this. You're okay? Good. So Justin Martyr, as we'll see on Wednesday, our first good, clear example, right, is writing polemically. He has very clear ideas about circumcision, and he's not embarrassed to say it, and he's clearly attacking the Jews' interpretation or understanding of these very biblical verses. So I'm looking around for a nice Jewish reply. I don't have a Jewish anti-Christian book. I have to wait for another millennium to go by in antiquity to get one. So I'm looking for one, and here I found one. It's covert, it's implicit, but I think it gets the job done. This is from Tractate Nedarim, from the Mishnah. So again, the Mishnah, don't confuse the word Mishnah with the word Midrash. Midrash is scriptural commentary, scriptural exegesis. We already used that word once. Right? Whereas Mishnah is a book of the 2nd century, the first rabbinic book. It's a law book. It's a book of laws. Book of laws, full of legal discussions. So here is Mishnah Nedarim. Rabbi Yishmael said, Great is the precept of circumcision, since 13 covenants were made over it. The footnote will explain to you what that means. Right? So in other words, the commandment of circumcision has the value of 13 covenants. Alright, you ask what does that mean? Of course it's rhetorical, it's homiletical. What he's trying to say, of course, is circumcision is really big. It equals 13, not just x, it equals 13x. Rabbi Yossi said, circumcision is a great precept. Hebrew there is mitzvah, commandment. For it overrides the severity of the Sabbath. Okay? Let's say a baby boy is born on Saturday. That happens. Baby boy on Saturday, so you count 8 days. 8 days inclusively means next Saturday. So, do you do a circumcision on the Sabbath?
Yes.
Yes. Does circumcision override the Sabbath in that sense? Yes. Because inevitably, are you going to have to desecrate the Sabbath, inevitably, to do the circumcision? Yes. Do you do it anyway? Yes. So Rabbi Yossi says, you see, that shows how great circumcision is. It even overrides the Sabbath. And everybody knows how important the Sabbath is. Rabbi said, that's the name of a fellow who was simply called Rabbi, I guess par excellence, right? Rabbi Judah, rather the patriarch, said, great is circumcision, for notwithstanding all the precepts which Abraham fulfilled, he was not designated perfect till he circumcised himself. As it is written, walk before me and be perfect. Genesis chapter 17, verse 1. So that chapter in which God lays out in great detail the commandment of circumcision, and that chapter which tells us how Abraham faithfully observed what God commanded him to do, that chapter opens with the statement, walk before me and be perfect. Meaning, what makes Abraham perfect? Circumcision. It is a circumcision that is now I would elaborate a little bit, is a perfection of the human body. Or the obedience that we show by doing circumcision is a sign of perfection. I'll come back to that in 1 second. Another explanation, great circumcision. Okay, I'll skip that one. It's the next part. Okay, then we go to the Talmud, which are later elaborations and commentary on the Mishnah. So we have the same point. It was taught, Rabbi said, greater circumcision, for none so ardently busied himself with God's precepts as our father Abraham, yet he was called perfect only in virtue of circumcision. And we have another version, next paragraph, greater circumcision counterbalances all the other precepts of the Torah. Last paragraph, great circumcision, since but for it, heaven and earth would not endure. It has cosmic importance. Now, I realize most of you are not familiar with rabbinic style or rabbinic homiletics, or perhaps rabbinic exaggeration, but trust me on this one. This is not routine. Rabbis don't go around saying, eating matzah on Passover is the greatest precept, to equal all the other precepts in the Torah. But honoring your father and mother is, but for honoring your father and mother, heaven and earth would not endure. No, they don't talk that way. There's something about circumcision to elicit this kind of, let's be honest, ladies and gentlemen, exaggerated, over-the-top praise. Presumably, these passages are not innocent bits of homiletics. Presumably, these passages are the rabbis responding to something or somebody out there who one assumes is saying the opposite. Now, it would be nice if they're Christians. That would be lovely, because now I have a real perfect debate, as we'll see on Wednesday. Christians will side with Paul already. Paul cites as the proof text that we Christians don't need circumcision of the flesh. Who is my biblical paradigm for that in Paul? Chutzpah. It's Abraham. Because Abraham in chapter 15, 2 chapters before chapter 17, Abraham is called righteous. Abraham is deemed reckoned righteous in God's eyes. And Paul says in Romans, you see, Abraham is fully righteous in God's eyes, chapter 15. He's not circumcised yet, and he's still righteous before God. It shows you don't have to be circumcised to be righteous. You can be righteous before God without circumcision. And this passage says in reply, oh yeah, you can be righteous, but you're not perfect. It's a beautiful debate. You can be righteous, but you're not perfect. You want to be perfect in God's eyes, blameless in God's eyes, you got to be circumcised. That's chapter 17. To which the Christian says, yeah, I know, but chapter 15, you're righteous. But the Jew says, yes, but chapter 17, you're not perfect. You're perfect. So here I can hear a real argument. This is a real debate. I would love if this were what I just said, it's not just my Shai Cohen making this up. It would be nice if this were in fact a real debate, to which I can't prove at all. But, alright, that's what we do in the ancient Jewish studies business. You make it up and you hope that it's right. Okay, but in any case, you have this, even if this construction is not exactly right, at least we see that this passage is exaggerating, is bestowing extraordinary value and significance on circumcision, probably because there are Jews out there who in fact are denigrating it. Or there are Jews out there who are saying, it looks like it's important. I admit Genesis 17 seems to swell beyond the normal reasonable statement about the value of a commandment, admittedly, but I will explain to you why you really don't need it. Or I'll explain to you why it is not as important as you think it is. And this rabbinic text comes and says, no, it's even more important than you thought it was. Okay, the other half of this discussion will continue on Wednesday. We will look at the Christian side. Okay.